Hello, everyone. I'm thrilled to introduce Julie Broad. Julie is the founder of Book Launchers, a firm that helps aspiring authors self-publish and market their books. Julie is also the Amazon best-selling author of 3 books, including her most recent title, Self-Publish and Succeed, the no boring books way to writing a nonfiction book that sells. Julie, welcome to Write with Impact.
Thanks so much for having me.
That's great. Before we dive into today's conversation around writing books and self-publishing, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so that's always a fun one because I'm a real estate investor with an MBA in real estate and finance who's gone on to run a self-publishing firm. But I mean, ultimately, I've always loved writing, and it is a long journey. But the crux of what got me into self-publishing in particular was a situation that came up with Wiley, one of the major publishing houses, and I'd been introduced at an event, and I said, they were like, oh yeah, that'd be interesting. Do you have any book ideas? And I told them about my real estate book idea. And they're like, no, real estate books, we've done all the general ones, but we have an idea that we've been looking for an author. And so, you might be good fit for that. So they gave me a book idea and we built the book proposal for 3 months together. And after that, they sent me an email that said, the marketing department doesn't think you have a strong enough platform to sell books. So first they didn't like my book idea. Now they don't like me. And I laugh now, but it was at the time, truly, it was quite devastating because that little girl who always wanted to be a writer, she was excited because she was going to get a book deal. And, but it was really the greatest gift that I could have ever been given, because once I kind of recovered from it, I realized the original book idea I wanted to write was something I had to write. I knew there was going to be people that would benefit from it. And it introduced me to really what was the only option, was self-publishing. And I went at it with a vengeance and really kind of studied everything there was, which in 2011, there wasn't that much, but I studied everything I could find on book marketing and publishing. And I ended up taking that book that they said wouldn't sell by the author that said they didn't have a strong enough platform to sell books. I took it to #1 on Amazon in Canada, which is where I'm from originally. So ahead of Dan Brown, ahead of Game of Thrones, selling thousands and thousands of copies. And it was, again, just one of those moments where I realized I didn't need to be chosen. I didn't need a book deal to be a legitimate author. And it, little bit by bit, it kind of led me to, helping other authors, and then realizing there was a really big need for a firm that does everything under one roof with a marketing focus, because that's why my book did well. I was terrified nobody was going to buy it. So from day one, I was thinking about how I would sell it, and I built everything in the book set up to sell. So, and that's what we do at Book Launchers today.
That's fantastic. That's a very inspiring story for people like us who are, thinking about writing a book and maybe haven't written our first book, or maybe thinking of writing a second book, and trying to make it work better than the first. I'd love to ask you about the process that you use to write your own books, and also how you help your clients write books. But before we get to that, I'm wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about why publish a book to begin with. I mean, what good does that do?
Yeah, I mean, everybody has different reasons. And so I don't think there's one right or wrong reason to do it. I think one of the things that when I ask authors kind of after the fact what's been the biggest surprise, it's the impact that they've had and how much it's meant to them. So I think, if you want to help people, if you want to have an impact on people's lives, a book is a tremendous way to do that. And getting that email 3 years later that you helped them, that's pretty phenomenal. But there's, of course, financial benefits to writing a book too, especially a nonfiction book that's tied back to your brand or your business. It opens the door to speaking opportunities, to consulting gigs, to having courses. Bulk book opportunities are also quite big for a lot of our clients. They'll go into a school, and now the school has bought 100 copies of their book, or they are doing a corporate speaking engagement or a corporate kind of deal, and they've got books that way. So there's lots of ways to make money from a book as well. And I think for me, the coolest part is the doors it opens. The opportunities that you don't even know are out there, and you have the book, and the book just kind of wiggles its way out there. I mean, look, my first book ultimately led me to leave real estate and run a publishing company. I never saw that one coming.
That's a fantastic story. And then why self-publish? I think you told us, your background story, which is very inspiring. And but what do you tell clients or others who are thinking of publishing, and they may be sitting on the fence? They may be thinking, you know what, I really need that stamp of approval from a traditional, quote, traditional publisher. What do you tell them to sort of, go the other way and self-publish?
I mean, I'll never try to convince somebody that traditional isn't the right move for them. I would just present a few things that they may not have considered, which is traditional. A lot of people think that if they get a traditional book deal, they just write the book and everything else is handled. The reality is, for the exact reason I didn't get a book deal, the traditional publisher is looking at you to sell those books. They might put them in the bookstores, and even that's getting sketchy nowadays. It's definitely not a through line into the bookstores anymore.
Mm.
But that's it. You still have to move the books off the shelves, off Amazon. So you're still responsible for marketing. In exchange for getting that book deal, you're giving up your rights and your royalties. Now, the royalties is one that, a lot of people are like, oh, wow, I don't care if I only make $1 per book, versus the 6 I could make if I self-publish. But the rights, you should really care about your intellectual property. It's your expertise, it's your story, and you don't own it. Once you get a traditional deal, you don't own it.
Let's talk a little bit about, some of the strategies in your book, which is excellent, by the way.
Thank
So
you.
congratulations. I think it's a fantastic book. Self-Publish and Succeed, the No Boring Books Way to Writing a Nonfiction Book That Sells. There's so much to cover, I'm sure, but we're going to have to start somewhere. So how about, you talk about how to write a hashtag no boring book. I don't know if that's trending on Twitter or anywhere at the moment, but in any case, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So, I mean, a nonfiction is one of those things that, especially because I'm from the real estate space where I've read a lot of real estate books, every book started to sound the same. And that's really, really boring. And it's not going to help you in any way. It's not going to sell. And to me, I think just because somebody, kind of feels like they have to read your book, to get whatever information you're giving them, I think we can aspire to do better. I think we can aspire to create books people want to read. And once they start reading it, they keep reading it. And you're kind of giving them a payoff at every corner, right? It's like you're giving them a good story. You're giving them a little laugh, you give them payoffs. And so for everybody, though, the no boring books is going to be different for everybody because every book's going to have a different style. But to me, it's being vulnerable. It's sharing what's real, and it's telling your truth. Because a lot of us, especially in nonfiction, you want to present the version of yourself that you think people want to see or hear or whatever that is. And so that can make a really boring book because you're not being honest, and the reader will know. They may not know what you're hiding, but they're going to know that the book is flat. So a general tip is just tell your truth, be honest, share the warts. That, I always tell people a bad day is actually a bad year, because we can relate to that. Universally, I think we can all relate to a bad year. That is a phenomenal chapter in your book, right? Those hard times are the very thing that gives your book the grit and the engagement that the reader's looking for.
That's tremendously inspiring. Why do people want to read about, your toils and troubles? I remember, reading your book and reading about your story. And, you already related it just very briefly of being rejected by a traditional publisher, a major traditional publisher, which is Wiley. But I think the way you described in the book was actually, you really did cry for a good 20, 30 minutes afterwards. And then you just picked yourself up and said, okay, I'm going to do this. That is tremendously inspiring. But why? I'd rather hear it from you. Why do you think readers want to read that kind of story? And then how does that help sell books?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, there's two things I want to touch on here. One is you don't want to get too lost in the fact that you're telling your story, right? It always comes back to what the reader really needs to know. So some people, you can write your book for therapy. That's totally fine. That's a different kind of book. But if you really want your book to sell, you have to think about the reader. And so as much as I told that story, there's a whole bunch of details I left out because you don't need to know
Sure.
all of it. You just need to know, like, I was devastated. This is what happened. And so you that's one thing. You got to tell the reader what they need to know. The other kind of piece of not being boring, the best way I can describe it is to tell you an example of a book that we had to abandon ship on. And it doesn't happen very often. My team is pretty phenomenal at taking ideas and turning them into books. But this one person, he had had a perfect life, or at least he presented it as a perfect life. I actually think he genuinely has lived just one of those rare people that nothing's really gone wrong. He married his high school sweetheart. He bought his dream home in his early 20s. He worked for his parents' business. He got into real estate on the upswing of the market and just made buckets of money. So everything went right. And his book was horrible. There was nothing there because nobody can relate to everything going right.
I certainly can't. Yeah, no,
no.
I wouldn't want to read that.
There's also no lessons in that. And that's the thing, like all of the juicy lessons and the hard insights that we've come by have come through those tough times and through, crying in your bedroom, devastated, and picking yourself up and going, okay, I'm going to do it anyway. Right. That's where the insights and the good lessons come from.
That's fantastic. Thank you. No, I think that's a fantastic answer, and really resonates with me. I'm wondering if we could talk a little bit about writing process, because that's a topic that I like to talk to my guests about on Write with Impact. You have what you call the 3 Ts of speedy writing. Can you break that down for us and explain what do you mean by the 3 Ts of speedy writing?
Yeah, and I've actually added a fourth one, so
Oh,
you get a bonus. So the 3 Ts are topic, target, and just a topic. Now I've dropped the third one. Topic, target, and it'll come back to me. And then the bonus one is template. And so the whole thing is that when people sit down to write, they often are rereading what they wrote the night before. And so you end up with a really polished first chapter and a book that never gets done. And so my suggestion is to sit down and have your topic. So before you finish today, if you're writing, you write down notes on what you're going to talk about the next time. And then you're going to have your target. So for me, a target is always a time. I've never been someone who kind of works for word count, because sometimes I can like fly through thousands of words, and then other times it's really hard and I have to, just sit there. So I usually make myself sit for 30 or 40 minutes. That's that. And then I don't know where the other one went. Time. Oh yeah, time. It is time. So it's, for whatever reason, that time just didn't want to go there. And so it's trying to write at the same time on a regular basis, because it teaches you to, your brain's just like, oh, okay, now we're gonna write. And the fourth one that I've added is template. This is something that we've started to do for a lot of our clients, is basically create a chapter template. So you've got a sense of the structure of each chapter. And I find that template, for a lot of personalities, not everyone, but a lot of personalities, that template really gives them that structure, so that when they sit down, they've got that form that they're going to be writing in. So the big thing though, if you take only one thing away from this is don't go back and edit what you've written the night before. Write your topic down for the next day and only write that. And then when you're done, write your topic for the next day, and just keep doing that until your book is done. Don't go back and reread, and you will write your book way faster, way, way, way faster.
what do you mean by write your topic exactly?
So for example, if you've got an outline, which hopefully you do, you might have the 3 Ts with the bonus fourth T. And that would be one of the topics under your how to save 1,428 hours writing your book. And so you might know that tomorrow I'm going to write that. And you'd write down, a bullet point of, okay, I'm going to talk about the 3 Ts. So you kind of lay the framework for those things. Or if you know there's a story you're going to write out, or if you have the 7-step process to something, you just make a note of what that is, because what most people do is they reread the previous section to figure out what to write next.
Okay, so it sounds like is topic more, is that your word for outlining?
Well, because you've already got the outline, right? This
Right.
is your writing strategy. So this is when you sit down to write. So it can be your outline, but when you're writing, your brain is working. And so your timer may go off, you may have to get to a meeting, whatever it is, what you were going to write next. So just write a quick note about it. And if you don't, then that's where you would go to your outline and go, okay, what is next? Like if you finish that chapter, what is next? So it's kind of a combination. I find there's a few people that we work with that follow their outline to a T, but most people use the outline as their starting place. And then as they're writing, the book develops. And so that's why you just figure out what you're going to write next, write that down, and then shut it down for the day.
Right. And then the next one is target. And by target, you meant target time or word count? And it could be either or.
Yeah, some people really like we have one client who is 1,000 words a day. That's his like, and he hit it 30 days in a row. It was really incredible to see. He was like every day he wrote 1,000 words. That worked for him. For me, I need a time, and that's 40 minutes of uninterrupted. So all internet is turned off, no notifications, and I just write for 40 minutes. That works better for me. So you got to find what works for you because everybody's a little different. Whatever is going to give you that sense of accomplishment, I think is what you want to strive for. And don't set it so high that you can't achieve it because the 1,000 words a day would have been really defeating for him if he was only doing 250.
I see. And then the third one, the third T, I'm sort of going through each one again once more, is time, right?
Mhm.
And how is that different from, say, a time target like you just described?
Yeah, it's the time of day. So you kind of
Oh,
want
I
to
see.
choose, yeah, it's the time of day. Ideally, it's the same time every day, or if you write every Monday, it's the same time. But you've got to find your time of day. Some people are really great night writers. I had to write in the morning, as horrible as it was. I had to get up at 5:30 most, to get the writing done. That's when my brain was clear and the things were quiet. So you have to find that time. But the beautiful thing is if you start writing at the same time, you train your brain, kind of like when you're going running, right? You don't have to think about it after a while. You just put your running shoes on and click your watch and off you go. It's the same with writing. If you're doing it at the same time on a regular basis, your brain just goes, okay, we're writing.
That's great. And then finally, template, which is, it sounds like it's structure. It just sounds like for every chapter you have a template, you have a structure that you can follow, and it's a way, it's a guide.
My book doesn't have a firm template, but a typical structure of one of my chapters is I open with a story
Mhm.
and then I teach a lesson from that story. And then I add more material, sometimes have another story, but I add more material onto that lesson and kind of build from that. So if I was to create a structure for mine, that would typically be what you see in my chapters. Some of our clients will have, they'll have kind of excerpts. So they'll have, like a pull-out box of kind of lessons, and they'll have case studies, and they'll have, so every book is going to have a little bit different, but I have found that some people, I don't function very well as a writer with a firm template. Like if I'm told I have to write a story here, I don't function. But some people really thrive in that kind of structured environment, and having some certainty around knowing they're going to have a story, a case study, some bullet points. So that can be very beneficial for some people.
That's great. No, thanks for breaking it down, and apologize if I asked you to repeat some aspects of it. I just wanted to be very clear about it. Hopefully, my listeners, I think, should understand by now.
Yeah, it's
Um,
great.
I mean, and then there's so many other things. Maybe there one or two other aspects of writing or editing, the editing process, that you can share with us before we move on to marketing, which is something that you're an expert at. And I'd love to ask you a little bit about marketing. But before we get to marketing, tell us about editing. What's the process that you use for your own process and also for your clients?
Yeah. So one of the things that one of the reasons I've done so many videos and I wrote this book was I've seen so many people who invest in editing, but it doesn't make the book better. And it's because they've hired copy editors before they've done the developmental editing. And so a copy editor will make your book grammatically correct, but they don't actually make it a good read. And so if you are going to really focus on this and focus on editing and you want a good book, you need to hire a developmental editor first. And it's going to be a painful edit. Like it's the emotional edit. It's the edit that somebody goes through and goes, um, you know, can you add more stories? I don't know if I believe you here. Can we reorganize this? I think you need more examples. So it's where you think you're done writing, and then you find out you still have a lot more writing to do. But that is what makes your book so much better. And then you go through copy editing, which is your sentence structure, word choice, grammar. That will polish your book. But to make it a great, engaging read, you need that developmental edit. So I just want everybody to know that order before you hire editors, because it's so important and they are different. For us, just to give you a sense, I've found the best content editors are journalists and the best copy editors are rule followers. They're the people who can follow the Chicago Manual of Style and they love it. And so that's two very different personalities. But yeah, we also ghostwriters are great too for that. But I found the journalists are really great because they can kind of sniff out where somebody's hiding something and they can be like, hey, wait a minute, is this true? Like, is this a fact? And so they
Mhm.
really can enhance that book. And so yeah, we have lots of different content editors on our team, but we've found a little bit of a bias towards the journalists.
No, that's great. I know exactly what you're talking about. By the way, you just mentioned a couple of times the term ghostwriter, and I understand that your firm does provide. There are two types of services, from what I understand from your
Mm,
website and talking to you. Is one where looks like you coach the writer, but the writer does the writing,
yep.
but you do intensive coaching and assistance. There's another package or another type of service that you offer, which is ghostwriting. How does that work?
Yeah, so I mean, we call it ghostwriting on the exterior for the fact that that's what people know it as, but inside we really call it a writing assist because ultimately the book
A
doesn't
writing
exist.
a
A
writing
writing
assist?
assist, yeah.
Okay.
Ultimately, the book doesn't exist in either case without you. Our writers don't do research, so anything that's in the book has to be provided by the author. And so it's really set up to, if you're really busy and you don't like typing, then you've got somebody that's going to talk to you and extract the story and build the story for you and do the typing for you. If you want to write the book yourself, then we have a writing coach who's going to act as your kind of your emotional support system, accountability to keep those word counts, to keep the targets, to make sure you're getting the writing done. And then they do provide writing coaching as well. So typically we're saying, okay, there's two things that happen. One is halfway through the book, people start writing a different book. So the writing coach is there to keep them on topic. And then the other thing that happens is they start getting boring, right? The emotion gets lost in the whole journey. And so the writing coach is there to kind of prompt them and encourage them to share more emotion again.
Okay, that's very, very interesting. Thank you for clarifying that. Marketing. You have sold a lot of books. Your first book was a hit, a smashing success. Um, and now you've built an entire business around it, which is very, very impressive. And I've heard you, I've watched you talk, and I've been reading your book about marketing, and it just seems so absolutely crucial to what you do, and also the services you provide. We're not going to be able to go through every single aspect of that, but could you share two or three strategies or tactics, whatever you want to call them, tricks of the trade,
Mhm.
but the less obvious ones, things that people, authors may not really understand fully or have tried?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing might seem obvious on the surface, but I find that most people don't get it right, which is the hook of your book. So
Mm.
you need a clear and compelling hook. And that hook is the through line of your entire book. And here's the piece that people miss is they'll be like, my book is about leadership. That's not the hook. That's not going to sell your book. A leadership book has to be something that a reader goes, I need that right now. So if I'm now a leader, what's different in my life? How is this book going to be different than the 400 other leadership books in creating something for me as a leader? So once I read this book and I become this amazing leader, now I'm going to get promoted. Now I'm going to have the respect of my friends. Now people will finally like me where they didn't like me before. Whatever it is, you have to have that extra, right? It can't just be leadership. It's once you have this leadership approach that's different, then and that hook is so crucial, and so few authors get it right. And it's also hard to see what's cool about yourself because that's an element of this, right? Is what are you talking about that's different than the other people? And that's got to be in there. That's number one. The next thing is a piece that I find so few people spend time on and yet has a huge payoff, and that's your table of contents. uh, every chapter title should have a sell a benefit or create curiosity or both. And if you do this well, you'll get media. When you're talking to people, they'll be like, hey, can you do a workshop on this? Can you, oh, I'd love to hire you to do this chapter for me. So if you can think of that as every chapter title has to sell something, if you think of it as a course, if you think of it as a workshop title, you will spend more time on your chapter titles. And I've seen it with my own books. I've had one title in my second book called You Are Who Google Says You Are. And largely my entire marketing platform around that book ended up being come speak to my group about this chapter. So that was accidental, right? It was just one of those chapters, but the title was catchy and everybody wanted to know. So that's really, really important. The third thing is the title, subtitle, It's for your reader. The title, subtitle, and the cover. It is not about what your wife or your husband likes. It's not what your colleagues think is great. You have to focus on selling that book to the reader. And you have to choose a title that is going to be something that's going to resonate with them and go, okay, this book is obviously for me. I need to pick it up. And I think a lot of authors kind of lose sight of that. And they're like, well, my colleagues don't like this title. Well, your colleagues aren't the ones we're trying to sell it to. We're trying to sell it to the potential clients.
Well, that's fantastic advice. What has changed recently, and also what do you see changing over the next year or two in terms of, the platforms that you're using or that you recommend your clients use to sell books, or the strategies that you recommend them? Is anything changing? I know things have changed over the years, right? Different platforms have cropped up. Some have faded away. Certain strategies have worked very well in the past. Maybe different ones work now better. What kind of changes and trends do you see in terms of book marketing?
I mean, bookstores it's really shifting to local. Barnes and Noble in the US in particular has been bought out, and the same people who own Waterstones in the UK are now operating it here, and they went local. And so we're seeing that more and more, is that it's local buying. So the publishers are losing that grip on their stores, except for the bestsellers. But for if you have a local book, you have a very good shot at getting into your local Barnes and Noble. And we've seen that in Canada for a while. Chapters has been fairly local focused for quite some time. So that's in North America. I think that's really cool. Audiobooks just continue to grow, and the platforms and the offerings and the subscription-based services that are out there are expanding internationally and quite rapidly. So unfortunately, it's still quite expensive to produce a high quality audiobook. But if somebody has the budget, I highly recommend they do it, because it really does enhance your discoverability and your reach.
Do you recommend, of course, it depends on the author's voice, and most people don't want to even hear their own voice, but do you have clients that would prefer to read the book by themselves?
I recommend it, especially nonfiction. If unless, there's sometimes reasons why. Some are dyslexic, they don't like their accent, or whatever it is. We've had clients that say I don't want to read it for a variety of reasons. But because we're doing nonfiction, the example I give is Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a. And I listened to that audiobook after having heard him on 20 podcasts, and it just threw me the whole time that it wasn't his voice, right? Because I had built that trust with him. And then it's not him telling his stories. It's not him,
Right.
talking about these very personal experiences. So for me, it kind of jarred me. And I think the converse is true. If you want to have your voice in somebody's head and build that trust and have that kind of long-term relationship that you didn't have to invest hundreds of hours of FaceTime in getting, you should record your own audiobook. And it's also fun. I mean, a lot of our clients really enjoy it. And it's also an opportunity to find typos.
No, that's great. I know, podcasts have exploded over the past 5, 6, 7 years. And as audiobooks have as well. And I just think it's one of the main reasons is that people definitely still want to learn new things, but they just, it allows people to multitask, right? You could wash the dishes, you could be on the subway, you could be driving, although my wife wouldn't allow me to do that, but I'll do it when she's not in the car, and listen to an audiobook or a podcast and learn, or, be entertained.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Anything else that you want to share before I let you go back to writing, publishing, and marketing best-selling books?
I think if you can take one thing away, it's that your book might be about you, but it's for your reader if you want it to sell. So, I mean, you can write a book that's just about you for your own purposes, but if you want it to sell, you really have to bring it back to that reader and get to know who that reader is, because they're not a demographic. They're a person with a specific problem, and they're going to look to you to solve it or create some sort of an outcome for them. And you'll write a book that is much more likely to sell if you focus on that reader the whole time.
Great. And why do people still want to read or listen to a book? Why do you think? I like to ask my guests this, because a lot of books are published every year. So, and there's a reason for that. There's a reason why you have a successful agency helping clients to write and publish their books. So why do people read or listen to books?
I mean, for less than $20, you get thousands and thousands of dollars worth of somebody's experiences, expertise. You can avoid mistakes that somebody else has made, which would be really expensive, painful, time consuming, by reading a $20 book. So I think the payoff is tremendous. And as long as we keep creating amazing books that do have that payoff for people, people will always read.
That's fantastic. And Julie, what's the best way for people to reach you?
Head over to booklaunchers.com/7 steps. And that is our 7 steps to write a book that is set up to sell. So it kind of walks you through some of these things that we talked about to layer in early. And that gets you my email address. So once you sign up over there, you're good to go to hit reply and send me an email.
That's great. Julie, thank you so much for joining me on Write with Impact. Really appreciate it. Fantastic, very practical, nitty gritty advice. And again, I highly recommend that everyone go out and buy your book. Extremely well written, very clear, and very actionable.
Thank you.
Thank you.